There's no better way to begin than with this quote from Tim Sweeney, CEO of Epic Games. If you want to play it in Steam, then you have to get this scarlet letter of AI attached to your product, and now there is a hater community trying to kill your game. What a fun quote. Now, it came from a recent interview where he made clear his dislike for Steam's AI disclosure requirement, which isn't exactly news. But, thanks to some new data, we have evidence to suggest something a little shocking. That Tim Sweeney is actually correct. The games with Gen AI disclosures really might sell worse on Steam. That means we have plenty to dive into today. The interview in question was with PC Gamer at Unreal Fest, and it was a wide-ranging one, but one answer seemed particularly out of step with audiences, and that is how AI disclosures in Steam end up hurting developers. Here's another quote. I think it's really irresponsible of Valve. They shouldn't do it because it makes it much harder for a game developer to have a chance of success. You have to choose from either not using tools that can make you way more productive and probably failing due to competition that does. Now, obviously, Sweeney's argument isn't perfect rhetorically here. There are plenty of game developers succeeding on Steam right now who aren't using Gen AI, or at the very least, aren't disclosing that they're using Gen AI. So, Tim's speaking here as someone who thinks that Gen AI will make better games. Now, of course, I don't think he's just saying you're going to prompt an entire game into existence. Tim Sweeney is a very technically minded dude. I mean, quite literally, he's a fairly hardcore programmer. He's going to be thinking about things mostly from that perspective. Not just programming, of course, but technically minded, right? Of course, for the average consumer, for the average customer, well, very often the use of AI has just meant we've had a worse experience. That could be a chatbot on a website that's replaced customer support that gives you a really bad time. It could be seeing advertisements for things that just look absolutely awful, that look like slop. It could even be seeing the boomers in your life get repeatedly one-shot by weird AI videos that they think are funny even though they're not real. You know how it is. Now, Tim is aware of this divide. He goes on to say that due to, quote, many of the AI companies operating early on with such shitty practices, end quote, so he does know a lot of that stuff is shitty, that he knows that people don't like the stuff at all. And that's his problem. Now, obviously, we should think about incentives. This is perhaps tied to him announcing engine-level integrations with all the major LLM providers, of course, at the same Unreal Fest. That's via the likes of, say, MCP integration. So yeah, he does have a horse in the race. But it turns out, at least thus far, some of his argument seems a little backwards. And that's because there are stats making a lot of headlines saying that the companies using AI in their games are more likely to fail. Let's get to the bottom of this. Research firm Game Oracle ran a study in Steam games to see the impact of AI disclosures. Note, the impact of AI disclosures, not the impact of AI being used at, any point of the game development process. So what they did is they filtered out low review count, low sale slop. They made some assumptions about developer and publisher experience, and then they used Steam reviews as their sales metric, where the more reviews you have, more likely, the more sales you have. And it turns out Tim Sweeney's right. The AI disclosures make your game sell worse. Though, of course, correlation, causation, we should probably think about that. Now, their model compared two otherwise identical games, and it would show a 53% drop in sales. And the only difference would be an AI disclosure. That disclosure was the second most powerful variable in their model. The only factor that could impact sales more than that was the volume of other game launches and marketing near release. And they did, of course, check their work. Could hidden X factors be masking successful AI games? Well, for that to work, to paraphrase their maths, it would need to nearly triple the odds of AI adoption while simultaneously cutting review counts by 22%. Now, they cannot suggest why that might be the case. Their model doesn't do that. But they can see the impact on different types of developers. Inexperienced devs are barely impacted. Their inexperience wipes out any sales regardless of AI usage. But the devs that Tim Sweeney thinks need the technology are another story. This is where it's interesting. A, quote, well-established studio can see up to a 60% decline in reviews. And the more experienced the studio, the harder the hit. And the final position they landed on is that broadly, quote, AI use on average has a negative impact on sales for games that would have been a success regardless of whether AI was used or not. Now, there's clearly some sort of negative audience reaction to this technology. Disclosures can hurt sales, it seems. But there's one thing that Game Oracle and Tim Sweeney both fail to reckon with here, and it's this. Most of the games that disclose their AI usage in Steam don't actually need to. In January 2026, Valve rewrote their rules in AI disclosures. Simon Carlis of Game Discover Co. spotted this one first, and that's because Valve didn't actually announce any changes in public, so we're all very thankful that Simon spotted it. So what changed? Well, Valve's original disclosure was wide-reaching, and the understanding was that Valve was just worried about copyright breaches, so they asked for everything to be disclosed. That way, liability for DMCA claims would go to the devs. Well, the new disclosure contains exceptions. Coding and efficiency tools don't count. Instead, the policy is concerned with the use of AI in creating content that ships with your game and is consumed by players. Now, this includes content such as artwork, sound, narrative, localization, and so on. Tim Sweeney can breathe easy about Unreal Engine 6 then. Most of the features he wants devs taking advantage of don't have to be disclosed, but not all of them. In the interview, he did raise the question of using generative AI to build assets faster, avoiding what he referred to as, quote, $1 million plant pots. A waste of time and resources. Steam still will want to hear about those if a player can see them. They're still worried about the copyright and the risk that it carries for them. And certainly when looking at this and thinking about Valve, I would certainly say it's probably less good guy Valve, and it's probably more I couldn't be bothered with dealing with copyright bullshit Valve. And you really can't tell they're worried about copyright. The extra disclosure requirements actually further show that. They say that live-generated AI content requires a breakdown of guardrails on the models, and anything adult with that tech is completely banned. Valve don't want the platform coming under fire for generating illegal content. You know, like Grok did. That's the only thing that's banned then. Now, this isn't like, say, NFTs, where it might go outside of Valve's economy. This is purely just about giving people more information and, of course, copyright liability worries. Now, to break this all out of theory, let's deal with something practical, and that is Steam Next Fest. It gives us the best example of how this stuff is working. PC Gamer identified around 20% of the games featured at the event did have an AI-generated tag. User tag, that is. But by the time the event was over, the only game in the top 10 with that warning was the latest Nexon MMO, Embers of the Uncrowned. Of course, that's the kind of publisher with a big enough audience to eat any penalty that may exist. So you could say that we've literally seen Game Oracle's model actually playing out in the wild. We see it agreeing with reality. Though, of course, their model only models what it models, and that is not the use of AI, it is simply the disclosure. And if you're to think about that from a consumer psychology perspective, if something has to be disclosed, then you're probably going to think it's not a good thing. But overall, we have just seen that Valve's preference to just let the market sort out the wheat from the chaff, that it basically won out again, as evidenced by NextFest. But calculating all that stuff was an inexact science, and that's because while AI disclosures may be more than the Epic Game Store offers, it doesn't really mean that Steam wants you paying attention to them. And that's because, once again, we need to talk about incentives. Think about it like this. Game Oracle's model suggests that if a game features a disclosure of any kind, sales are likely to decrease. That does not benefit Valve. And in that context, ensuring developers aren't talking about code generation works in their favor. But it also means Valve are under very little financial pressure to improve the system of disclosure at all. However much the market at large seems to reject the disclosure, the less that you see them, the more money Valve will get. And that's perhaps why AI disclosures are a little bolted-on thing. They're not built into Steam's systems in a deeper level. Consider something like, say, Steam's accessibility features. Say you can't handle or just don't like QuickTime events. Well, as a part of Steam's accessibility disclosures, you can search only for games that don't involve QTEs. It is a discrete tag that is built into Steam's tools. And on a store page, it is right next to the Add to Cart button as an important bit of customer information. The AI disclosure is not like that. It's at the bottom of the page in a free-form text field that of course will take more effort to parse. They're not indexable in Steam natively, and that means that users, if they basically want AI disclosure tags, well, they basically need to resort to their own user-made tags, which is why browser extensions aren't really a perfect solution here. Basically, there's obfuscation in a way that other features don't have, and that's because Valve basically just rammed in a text box to deal with the problem. And there also doesn't appear to be any consequence for breaking these rules. I mean, you are absolutely supposed to disclose, but then there's The Alters. The Alters is a game that launched with AI content. The devs did not disclose it, and the content wasn't a placeholder that was left over or anything like that. Now, they did pull all of the related stuff a month after launch, but that was mostly because of social media outcry. There was no disclosure at any point, and no sale impact from the disclosure. If, of course, we're to believe Game Oracle's model, which would suggest that if the disclosure had have been there would have been a negative impact on sales. And that example basically brings together everything that we've been talking about today. Because what if a company simply never wears the scarlet letter that Tim Sweeney worried about so much at the start of this video? I need to be clear in scope. We have not been talking about whether devs should or should not use this technology. What we've been talking about is what happens when devs disclose that they've used that and how the market reacts. The evidence suggests badly, but of course, people like Sweeney do still want to look for benefits, and there's a simple solution in their end. A recent study of 400 professionals in Japan suggested that 70% of companies don't disclose their use. The logic is simple then. If they don't disclose it, then they cannot be punished by the, as Tim Sweeney puts it, hater community. They get all the upside and none of the market rejection. At least that's if they don't get caught out. But what the altar suggests is you can have it both ways. You can take the chance that you may never have to accept any risk for doing so and just push through if you happen to be caught out. All audiences lose out on is transparency and the chance to make an informed decision. And that's all because, as things currently stand, the only ones wearing the scarlet letter are the ones honest enough to actually do the disclosure. And the more that it's shown that there is a negative impact to doing that disclosure, the less will disclose. And I'm going to go totally off-piste here, but I have a thought. What if Valve doesn't really care and that's their plan? They have the disclosure thing there, maybe to help them deal with the copyright stuff, but Valve probably thinks that code is fungible, that ultimately, especially given the capabilities of, say, Fable and, whatever larger parameter models we get over the next, year or two, they probably think that those will just make it so that code is fungible and nobody will be able to tell the difference because code is code, whatever, it works. If that's going to happen, then Valve probably is fine to just say, if it's code, don't worry about it. Because ultimately, if the code is basically fungible and you can get more of it, you can maybe get it faster and you can maybe automate bug testing and a bunch of stuff, then, you can just have more games, which means more games in Steam, which means happy Valve. Obviously, the more immediate consumer-facing negative would be slop. Now, what do we even mean when we say slop? Well, I would say stuff of super low quality. Well, here's the thing. Steam Next Fest already shows us that the market is able to sort out the wheat from the chaff itself. And I guess that means that it's the AI-generated assets that's maybe where people are going to start having more issues. When it's the script, the audio, the art, and a bunch of things like that I suppose people see as being more creatively core to the experience that they're buying, as opposed to, say, the code side, which is basically just the technical facilitation of the artistic product. By the way, I mean, look, goated coders are extremely creative, and I think they are artists, but I think you can understand the point that I'm making here, and I think what Valve are counting on as all of this stuff diffuses as we go forward. I guess what I'd be really interested in is the likes of SynthID. That does exist for, say, image and video generation models. You would have to wonder then if that's something people will start trying to test games with. Obviously, the likes of SynthID can be defeated I guess I am kind of just spitballing as to where all of this stuff will go. Who knows? We will see. But no matter what way any of us may feel about any of the permutations of this technology, there's a core unifying thing of this story, and that is human incentives. Be that more product faster, be that be dishonest, or be honest, all of those things. It all, at the end of the day, comes down to human incentives, and I suppose, if we want good outcomes, we need to think about those incentives. I'll leave it at that, because what I really want is to hear what you have to say down in the comments, because this is one of those developing cultural issues, and I want to understand where many people from many parts of the world playing many different types of games in many different contexts. I want to hear what you all think about this, and what people in your life think about it. Are opinions about this in Mexico different to those in Sweden? Are those different to in France? Or are those different to Germany? Who knows? I'd love to know. So do let me know down in the comments. That's it for now, but don't worry, there is this video that you can watch next.